If you're a builder, remodeler, trade partner, architect, designer looking to grow your business, expand your network, and learn from some of the best minds in the industry, then you need to be at the Contractor Coalition Summit. It will be held November 6th through 9th in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this is not your typical conference. The Contractor Coalition Summit is built around real conversations, real relationships, and real strategies that you can take back and implement immediately. You'll connect with top performing contractors from across the country, hear from industry leaders, and gain insights on leadership, operations, sales, marketing, culture, profitability, and AI. Whether you're looking to scale your business, improve your systems, or simply surround yourself with people who are pushing the industry forward, this event is for you. We will see you November 6th through 9th, Charlotte, North Carolina. Go to www.contractorcoalitionsummit.com and register and sign up.
And so in that experience, I learned to be the one that finds the yes. I'm going to do the legwork. I'm going to put in the effort. I'm going to go out of my way to get the job done.
We're very excited for the podcast today. We have Nathan Wheeler on. Welcome, Nathan.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, so a man of many talents, or a veteran, military service. Thank you for your service. Developer of leaders, financial planning expert, keynote speaker, wealth strategist. You're involved in the Abundant Man. We're before we got started talking about podcast extraordinaire. I mean, you do it all.
I do some things, man. I like everything that I've done. Even as I sit and think about it, it was all how can I be better for the people around me? Even in the Army, it's okay, well, I know that being a paratrooper, being a ranger, doing some of these things, you're considered a force multiplier. You're adding value to the organization. Coming out of that, you know what I mean? Going into corporate space, I went and got some degrees so that I could add value to the organization. Coming out and being an entrepreneur, moving into finance space, went and got different certifications, and I continue to get different certifications so that I could continue to add value to the organization and to the industry at large. And then the Abundant Man Project. I mean, I want to add value to men, to the community, to the country, to the world, because I think some of that lies with men taking on a greater responsibility. Because I've seen a lack in that over the past couple of decades. So we want to improve that. We want to make some changes, very positive changes in that direction.
Well, I love that. Well, something you touched upon, I mean, you said a couple of times was value. And I think, as you look at, I'm sure your business, as you've, grown your business and enterprise and your network, the more value you bring to everyone around you, even if it may not be someone who really needs your services in some form or other, essentially you're building your brand, your reputation, your name for yourself because you're consistently look at that value.
Yeah. I think that's the most important trait, right? I've been in a lot of different rooms in my lifetime. Hey, how many fights you won determines the value that you add to the room. How many people you killed, how much money you made, how much this, that, and the other, and all that nonsense. I'll tell you what, the most significant value that I think anybody could add to any room that they're in is the value that they add to others. What are you doing to pour into others? That's what matters. And so it's kind of how I live. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean I'm always great at it. You know what I mean? I get overwhelmed. I do too much sometimes. And, we've got 5 kids and there's a lot going on here. And sometimes I overcommit and, I don't know, but I put myself in a bind, but I always show up when I say I'm going to be there, which again, it's kind of a sticky situation, that balance, kind of like we were talking about before we hopped on. It's hey, dude, there's the balance between all the things. And I've learned how to be more effective in that balance. And I think that's important. And I think it's important to share that. As you learn, I think it's important to share what you learn. I'm not a gatekeeper. I can never be a gatekeeper. And I'm not a big fan of gatekeepers. Let's learn things and pour into others. I think it's important.
I love that. It's funny because as you were sharing about pouring into others, in my head, I'm thinking, we align that way. And maybe from a devil's advocate side, from the opposite side, I was thinking, how do you prevent yourself from becoming overwhelmed, right? As you're looking at, these different ventures, and you mentioned you have 5 kids. You mentioned, you're involved in Abundant Man. I mean, these are things that are added to the plate, and it's hard to say no. But at the same time, there's a value to your time. Going back to that value term. But how have you found a good way to not overwhelm yourself, where you're saying yes to everything and you're being a little bit more? And I know this comes with time and experience and so many other things, right?
Yeah, dude. I was gonna say for sure, learn some of that the hard way. You know what I mean? But ultimately, what it comes down to, and what I've learned, and what helps me, prioritize is like, we learn in the military, you backwards plan. So you start with the end in mind. So in this context, what is the end? It's your identity, who you intend to become, because your identity is who you believe you are, right? And so we can shape our identity. And so when you have that design, that outline of like, hey, this is who I intend to become, you just kind of reverse engineer it. Okay, so if that's who I intend to become, what are the goals? What are the habits? What are the tasks that I need to have? What are the values that I hold? What are my ethos? Like, how do I define this? And then, like, as you encapsulate that identity, you really start to identify the things that don't align with that. And so it's not like an aggressive, no, I don't want to be a part of what you got going on. It's like, hey, I love you. I'm going to cheer you on. We'll do what we can to support as we can. But like at the end of the day, that doesn't align with the direction that I'm going. So I'm going to gracefully bow out. And conversely, it allows you to identify, hey, this aligns with what I am doing. Like, and I'll give you a perfect example. So like for me, I run a full service finance firm. I run a brokerage. We've got about 200 associates across country. We're doing good stuff in that space. And as the abundant man introduced itself, it was like, hey, does this align with who I am and what I want to do with my life? Well, for sure. My analysis of that is, hey, we're going to build men in the areas of faith, family, fitness, and finance. Well, finance is obviously that's something that I align with. Fitness, I try to stay pretty healthy. Like these area family, I've got 5 kids. Faith, I love God, believe in God. Like, so does this align with my identity and who I am? Absolutely. But then past that, does my involvement in this continue to add value? Can I pour in this enough to add value to the organization and stay present in the organization that I've already established? And so as I did that analysis, I identified like, absolutely, I can do these things. So that's like a real life example of how do I negotiate what things I'll say yes to and what things will I just step back from?
I love that you put it that way, because the reality is, Nathan, I mean, essentially you have core values. Any company that wants to be successful has to have core values, right? The owner has to believe it. The employees have to believe it. They have to be full step together, essentially. As individuals, you have to have that. And you mentioned faith, family, fitness, finance. And so, as things come across your plate, if they align in those, I'm sure it's a lot easier to say yes. And what's interesting, I would imagine for you that, in some ways there's a time commitment for some of these things, but also, there's networking, there's relationships, there's, information and knowledge that now you're getting from some of these other colleagues of yours that are probably, amplifying your business, making it better. So whether you're, increasing your reach from a business development side or maybe from a self-help side, I'm sure there's tools that you're getting, as you align with that.
100%. Like there's always overlap between the different things that I'm doing. And that's because, again, I've spent a lot of time being great in the space that I'm in, and I want to continue to be great. If I keep trying to be great in different areas that I like, I'll give you some examples here too, like leadership development. I mean, that's what I've done for 20 years. If I was in the military still, I'd be retiring this month, which is kind of crazy. I got out after 11 years, but then I jumped straight into corporate America and continued to build and develop others. And obviously the same bled over into financial services. And so leadership is a core thing. I know that I can leverage that and I can overlap that between what we do in the Abundant Man, what I do with my team in financial services, the different organizations that I partner with in different capacities. Like I know that we can leverage that. The same goes with finance. Obviously, if there's overlap in finance, then I know that it's not stretching me outside of what I am great in. Now, another thing like real estate, I am not an expert in real estate. Do I understand how real estate complements a financial portfolio and its necessity in being a part of a financial portfolio? Absolutely. But like, I'm not the real estate professional or expert, but I know the right people. So I say all this to share, like, there's obviously going to be overlap, but it's not going to be to the extent that I'm stretched so thin trying to be great in an area that is not my lane.
No, I love that. And, what's interesting, I was taking notes here. I mean, you just talked about how, you had, special force training, you've had, military leadership. How do you feel that prepared you for corporate America?
That's a really good question. And dude, like, it's so crazy to like stop and peel back my life at large. Because when a question like that pops out, it's like, I can't help but to think about life before the military, right? Because it is like, how was I different coming out of the military than when I went into the military? Perseverance has always been a thing. That has always like been a defining trait of mine since like a child. I don't know how to quit. And, but in the special operations community or in the military in general, it was almost as if like it helped guide me to that which I should pour energy into. You know what I mean? It like it because, and I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about success. I learned so much about the limits of other people. I learned so much about structure and how to build and develop others and how to build systems and processes. And there's a lot that I learned in the military. One of my favorite lessons, there's a couple of them, and both of them were really facilitated by the same leader. Number one, words mean things, right? Very basic, very simple, but very, very powerful when you can learn to communicate effectively based on the words that you're using. What you say matters, right? That was a very powerful lesson that I learned a little bit later in my career, to be quite frank. And then the other one was to find the yes, right? And this wasn't something that I learned directly from this leader, as words mean things, but it was something that I would not have learned had he not put me in the position that it was. We were trying to get ammo to Poland. And the route that we were taking had not been used since World War II. And everybody was telling us we couldn't do it. Everybody was saying no, like government officials, military officials, like contractors in between. Everybody's like, no, 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 we can't do this. And I'm just like, to make a long story short, I didn't accept that, right? People are just saying no because they don't want to do the work. They're not saying no because it's a hard no. They just don't want to do the work to find the yes. And so in that experience, I learned to be the one that finds the yes. I'm going to do the legwork. I'm going to put in the effort. I'm going to go out of my way to get the job done. And that was a very, very powerful lesson that translated very significantly to the corporate space.
You know, I love that. I think probably a unique advantage you have, you touched on this, perseverance, limits, understand that for yourself. I can imagine that in your corporate life and now, the entrepreneurship journey, there's setbacks, there's trials, there's difficult conversations, there's highs and lows, there's cash flow. I mean, all these different things that go into running any business and whatever your focus is. As you look back and you had, maybe perseverance instilled for whatever reason pre-military, and then you're in the military, as you learned your limits, as you learn to overcome those, as you learn to find the yes, as you mentioned, how has that helped you maybe in your, mental aptitude now, your leadership, instructing others, how has that benefited you just personally?
It's a really good question.
I mean, what are your limits? I mean, what were they in the military that you overcame?
I didn't really find them there. Like I remember I guess we could dive down that trail. I remember being in Ranger school and, I was very fortunate. I went straight through the course. I didn't get recycled, which is kind of unique. And I remember that it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
The Ranger school was?
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, it sucked, dude. Dude, Ranger school sucks, but it was kind of easy. I had prepared for it. And I remember I didn't find my wall. I didn't find my barrier there. And so I wanted to, and I came out of Ranger school and did a lot of other unique things to set myself apart. I served 11 years. I thought I was going to die in or retire out. Things didn't go the way that I planned. I was interested in finding my wall. But to make a long story short, I got out of the military, and how some of those lessons have helped me, man, it's a lot. I can't help but just to reflect on my life. And as I'm talking about this, where my brain is going is to that transition, immediately getting out of the military. And I'm going to tell you something, that was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my entire life. I thought that it was just going to be this next, okay, here's the next thing that we're going to do. It was not that. You got to understand, it's a literal identity crisis. Everything that I had built my life to be, everything that I had established my presence, my identity to be, was gone overnight. You know what I mean? And that's what we all go through. And civilians too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to discredit anybody's experiences. But I know for me, this transition was extremely difficult. It was extraordinarily hard. And quite frankly, if I didn't have kids, I'm not sure I'd be here. It was a challenge. It was a very challenging time. And I don't know if it was resentment for, my father, he killed himself, or if it was the perseverance that I had established. Like, I don't know what it was that really made me like push through, but I want to talk about this for just a second. I got out of the military and spent 6 months getting drunk because I didn't know what else to do. Right. I didn't drink when I had my kids, but when I didn't have my kids, I was just all the way in a bottle of whiskey. And then after about 6 months, I had to start making money. I had to start doing something to exist again because I really wasn't. I was a shell of a man. And so I went back to Afghanistan on a special operations joint task force. And that was like me pulling me out of this, depression, this identity crisis, again, that I was going through in isolation. Because it's not that there's love lost with the men that we served with, but their off tempo didn't slow down. They got a Charlie Mike. They got to continue mission, right? And veterans, we don't typically tie in with veterans. Statistically, the Marine Corps Times did a study on this till about 8 years after we get out. So I didn't lock in with any veteran community. And then civilians, how do we even relate? And so I'm going through this identity crisis and isolation in the worst way possible by sedating with alcohol. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to, again, me pulling me up out of that. I just went back down range. And every time I've been deployed, I didn't drink. And so it got me away from the alcohol. And it gave me like a reframe. And it's crazy even as I sit here and talk about it, because Iraq, the first combat deployment I had, saved my life from the existence that I had known as an adolescent, like growing up and some of the things I was doing. And then this, as a contractor, after getting out of the military, going back, that pulled me out of, this depression that I've been in. And so, again, I don't know if it was those lessons of perseverance that I had learned that carried me through. I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was, again, my children. I don't know what it was, but I was I was given the opportunity to reach down, tie my freaking boots up, and get back to it. So after that deployment as a civilian, I came back and really started focusing on building a career and an identity outside of the military. Like really, okay, it's time to do life. Like we've got to get back on the horse. We've got to go and figure things out. And so it was good. I had some amazing opportunities contracting for the government in different capacities. I went and worked at companies like Booz Allen Hamilton and Deloitte. I worked at AOCE, at SOS International. Like I worked at some heavy hitters, Delta Solutions and Strategies. I worked with some great organizations, and every one was a stepping stone as I learned how to assimilate, as I learned how to be a regular person again, as I learned how to exist in this new environment. And every single one of these gave me different skills that I could take, whether it was, again, relating to communication or relating to business structure or relating to consulting or, whatever it was. Like I picked something up in every space and then moved into the entrepreneurship realm. And where it's helped me there is, as I'm sure you know, entrepreneurship is a challenge. Like it's the path to the American dream, if you ask me. Like I don't really know too many people who are extremely wealthy punching a clock. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurship is that path, but it is a challenge because, dude, for so many reasons, as you start heating up and living into this identity, everybody else is going to try to cool you down and keep you in the box that they put you in. They see you the way they see you. And so they're not necessarily going to be, and it's not always intentional, but they're not always going to be as supportive as you may need them to be or expect or want them to be as you build into who you need to be to run a successful business. And then the business life is a challenge. No matter what industry you're in, dude, just like you mentioned earlier, there's the highs and there's the lows and there's all that happens in between. And it's a challenge to persevere through all of that. But strategizing effectively, again, not riding the highs too high or the lows too low, having a good support system, like celebrating your wins, again, shaping your identity, like all these things can help, facilitate success in entrepreneurship.
It's fascinating just listening to that journey. I mean, again, whether you point out specific things, you can see the growth, right? I mean, you mentioned going through some really hardship things from a family perspective, right, at a young age. And then, going through these trainings. And I would imagine even if, Ranger School, you weren't recycled through. I mean, this is something that in your opinion, you're able to get through. What was the hardest thing? Like when you look back physically, what are some of the hard things they made you do at Ranger School? Again, you passed it with flying colors, but, maybe for the layperson, like me or someone else, it'd have been a little bit more difficult.
Dude, everybody could, like, if you really wanted to, like, you could do it. yeah, you're going to have to get physically prepared. There's some challenges. You got, that first week, wrap week, and you go through some things physically. That wasn't too much of a
Trying to weed
challenge.
you out.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, like, hey, dude, you don't even belong. You don't even belong here.
Yeah.
Go home. That wasn't really challenging at all. I'll tell you what, man. There's a few times that come to mind, but one that I always just it stuck with me. I remember I was walking through the mountains. Mountain phase was like the worst, but also my favorite by far. And it's because it just sucks, dude. You haven't been sleeping, you haven't been eating, for however many days at this point because it's the second phase, and now you're just doing it all through the mountains and
Mhm.
and so you got mountaineering equipment, ropes, you know what I mean, like all the things that you need, and you don't drop your military equipment out, you don't trade them out, right? So we still
Mhm.
got the big guns, we still got the claymores and all the things, and so anyway. I remember I'm walking up this freaking mountain, dude, and life sucks. And I've got stories for days. One of the side effects of Ranger School is you can't stop talking about Ranger School. But like, there's this one day in particular, man. I was walking up this daggone mountain, and I'm carrying the big gun. I always volunteered to carry the big gun because I went through Ranger School as an electronic warfare specialist. I was actually the first electronic warfare specialist in the history of the military to go through and complete Ranger School, which is pretty neat.
That's cool.
And and so either way, you get peered in this course, which means after each phase, people are going to evaluate you. They're going to look at you from a peer perspective and really determine whether or not you're moving forward. And so me as the odd man out, like, cause you have little people that click up. You got people that come from the Ranger Regiment, people that come from the 82nd, people that come from the Infantry Basic Officer Leader Course. You got people that come from whatever, pick your different area, and they all kind of click up. And so they know that they're going to help peer each other through. And so anyway, I'm the odd man out as an electronic warfare specialist. So I'm getting ahead of the power curve, and I'm volunteering to do all the things that suck. So I'm carrying the freaking big gun. Right. And I remember walking up this mountain and I'm carrying this big gun, and the big gun's heavy, man. The big gun comes with ammo, and the ammo is heavy too. You know what I'm saying? And so, because ounces make pounds. And so anyway, I'm walking up this mountain. I'm just sucking. Life is miserable. And I'm like pointing I look at this tree ahead of me, and I'm like, man, if the security halt is not at that tree, I'm done. I'm done. I'm stopping. I'm not going one step further. And then I'd get to that tree. And I'd look at the next one. All right, if the security halt's not at that tree, I'm freaking done. I'm not going one step further. And I did that just, obviously to the end of the course, really. And but that was physically challenging, man. Like it's hard walking up and down mountains with a lot of heavy equipment. It's hard, leading men who are tired and hungry and don't want to do anything. It's hard leading yourself when you're tired and hungry and you don't want to do anything. And it can be hard, especially in those scenarios, to be selfless. And this is a very important lesson for everybody to learn, know, and understand. And that is this, man. Success is a team sport. Mm-hmm. So the more that you can be selfless, the more that you can give, the more that you can seek to do more for others, the more will come to you, right? And so, because again, success is a team sport. So if you're always thinking about self and that's all you're focused on, then you're not really going to have a team. So success is going to be elusive. And so it's essential that we put ourselves to the side for the greater good, if you will. You know what I mean? For the mission.
Yeah, and really for the mission. I mean, and to your point, there's a couple things there. I mean, I'm sure you could relate now. When you're in a leadership role, in the private industry, it's the same thing. I mean, there's times you maybe if you own a small company, you're paid last. There's times that you are doing what you can for the mission, for the team, for the morale, for cash flow, whatever it may be. And, putting your company in a position where, you see the end game, you can get through that. And, I was fortunate. I ran cross country and track, in high school, did the high jump. But I remember in my running days, and I ran a few half marathons competitively after, many years ago, not anymore. But point being, there were times, in distance running where it's the same thing, kind of like your analogy of mountaineering. I mean, very different, but there were times where you're just worn out and you're like, okay, I'm just going to run to this leg, this segment, to this location. And then, so mentally you're just playing these mental gymnastics in a way, like I just got to get to this point. And, I think in life there's, there's a balance, because I remember reading this poem, essentially it was this, as a kid, and it said, when I'm 16, I'll be happy because then I have my license. And then when I'm out of high school, I'll be happy. And then, once I graduate from college, I just can't wait to be done with these exams. And then once I'm in my career. And so, it's kind of this perspective. You're always looking ahead and you're kind of missing, every day-to-day journey and the element and growth. And the experience, you look back and you're like, that's one of the happiest times I missed it. And so, yeah, there's a fine balance to like, not missing, things that are happening, but at the same time, understand that things are happening and you can still focus on the end goal of your company or, for you, your four elements, your faith, your family, your fitness, and, your finance, and still, work towards it.
Dude, spot on. Like when you said that just a second ago, basically talking about living in the moment and appreciating kind of where you are and things you're doing, it did make me reflect on like living in Europe. You know what I mean? Like in the I was with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and it was just the op tempo was so high. Like we went to Afghanistan, got back from Afghanistan, and started going into all these different, countries, training with our allies in the region. And I remember I was drinking a lot. Like I was drinking over there. There's a lot of alcohol in the Army. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I always wish I could go back and just appreciate it more. But even now, like, and I've learned from some of that, like learning to like slow down and appreciate the kind of the season that you're in. And it's not always as easy as I'd like it to be because I'm very action oriented. I am on go mode. Like if there's a task, we're going to get it done. Like that's just the way my brain works. Like if there's something to do, I'm working to get it done as fast as possible.
We're totally.
And so sometimes it's not always as easy as I'd like it to be to stop and appreciate, what I'm experiencing. But I have been learning a lot more on how to do that. And there's something that I wanted to kind of be clear on too. While I was walking up that mountain, I was thinking those things. Like those were in my head. I didn't speak them out loud. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't speaking out loud, like, hey, if I'm going to quit here. Like I wouldn't even entertain that, like coming out of my mouth, but like that little, like, I don't know, the devil on my shoulder or whatever is the one that's like, hey dude, you're sucking. You gotta, if you can't make it past this point. Right. So like, there's like this battle that I'm going through. But one thing that I very intentionally stay away from is actually voicing the negative thoughts that enter into my head, because that happens. So I very intentionally focus on not saying those things, because what we speak about, we bring about.
I love that, because really there is a point to, what we're putting out, in the world and atmosphere. It's, words mean something. You said that. You said, hey, I learned words mean something. I had a leader that taught me that. I know something for you. You often say, the world is yours. Let's go get it. And you probably said that out loud. Like, where did that come from? How does, Dude, background?
I don't even remember exactly like where or what made me. It was a couple years. I remember the win. It was a few years ago. And that was just like, it was when I started dabbling like and doing stuff on social media. And like, it was like my tagline, if you will. And it just really resonated with me. Like, the world is yours, so let's go get it. And that's like in my brain. It's like, hey, dude, like you can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. You can accomplish whatever you want. So let's go do that. Because again, success is a team sport, right? So let's go do that. Let's actually embrace who we intend to be. Let's experience our potential and live into it. Like, and so that's just, I said it one day and it stuck with me. And so like, I've been saying it ever since. I always do little hashtags, and, it's just kind of my thing, man. The world is yours. So let's go get it. Yeah.
No, I love that mentality. What do you recommend to someone? Cause I think human nature, busyness, activity can be confused with progress. Right. And so as you think about strategic, like, execution, how have you seen maybe in your life, in your company, your family, those you've consulted, that to understand that just being busy doesn't mean you're being effective?
Dude, that's so good. And it reminds me of a story that a buddy told me. It's about a fisherman. Not going to dive into the whole story, but basically the premise is like this fisherman, spent all day getting ready, went out, caught no fish, but he, whatever. He was busy all day, but not productive. But then the other dude who kind of got things ready, went out early, started fishing, came back with fish. There was production, right? And so again, that's like a very snapshot. That's a story that came to mind. But like, some of the things that I do personally, and that I coach people through, again, it's a lot of it's around identity, right? Like, who do you intend to become? And I believe that your identity is, shaped by 4 pillars, right? Your associations, because who you spend the most time with shapes who you believe you are. Your habits, what you do consistently shapes who you believe you are. Your affirmations, what you tell yourself about you, shapes who you believe you are. And then your faith, what you believe your higher power says about you. In my case, I believe in God. So what God says about me shapes who I believe I am. Right. And so, like, these four pillars, I think, in this identity concept is like, that's like the starting point. And then as we kind of peel that back, like, how do we actually like stay productive within that space, to answer your question? So that brings me to the habits section. And so, like, I look at, a vision. I have like a 3 to 5 year vision, and then I have like a goal, and then I have habits that support that goal, and then I have tasks that support that habit. And like, I write this stuff down. And so I have like my board sitting on the other side of this, and it's like, I have my goals, right? And I have my goals in different areas, and my goals are SMART goals. So specific, measurable, achievable. That R is for risky. Some people say realistic. I like risky because I know that nothing great comes without risk. And so I want to put some skin in the game. And so that's where my R comes from. And then they're time bound. And so I don't just stop there, but I do. I write them down and I have them all there. And then underneath that, I put like, okay, here are the things that I'm going to do, right? Because that's the goal. So what are the tasks that I have? What are the things that I'm going to do to accomplish that goal? When is the time that I'm going to do these things? And where will I be when I do these things? So I get very, very, very clear and intentional on that. Like, so that I can actually have a metric. I can evaluate whether or not I am being productive. Because if I'm doing these tasks and I'm working, I will see that goal. I will see those tasks associated with those goals. I will see everything starting to lead to the accomplishment of my overarching goal and my vision being realized. And it's just a metric that we can train ourselves to. So that's part of what I personally do. And I have to-do lists. And so like it's sitting right here on my computer screen right now, the things that I got to do by Friday. And so I've set aside time to accomplish those things. And so how do I know whether I'm being productive or just busy? Am I checking that off the list? You know what I'm saying? Because I could sit here all day just scrolling or getting bored and just start typing stuff into AI and brainstorming. But that doesn't mean I'm accomplishing what I have on my list. So that's my metric. Did I get it done? Is my checklist getting checked off?
I love that. And going back to your point about, just the habits and like, setting smart expectations. You've heard there's a difference between an objective and a goal, right? So for you, I mean, if you're looking in the fitness space, it's like my objective, I want to get in better shape. Okay, well, that's a good objective. But like, what is the goal to get there? Is it I want to lose 10 pounds? I want to get to a certain body fat percentage, something you can measure, to your point, that you can, now work towards. And, I've always heard realistic. I've never heard risk. And I think, that's an interesting concept because, yeah, there should be a challenge, right? There should be something that makes you get out of bed to be like, hey, can I do this? Yeah, I can measure it, but am I going to get there?
Yeah, dude. And dude, spot on. And some things aren't inherently risky. So like, I make them risky through whether it's like, hey, if I don't do this or whatever, like if I don't execute, one of my things is being rated a 10 out of 10 husband. And so I have dates that I'll take like I have, again, when and where I'm going to do what. That's all written right there. And so like one of my things to keep it risky is if I don't take her on a date, then I'm putting $100 in the daggone date bucket, right? So, or another one, hey, if I don't do X, then I'm going to do 20 burpees, or you know what I mean? So some things aren't inherently risky. So I add a little bit of risk. You know what I mean? I do what I can on my side to make things just a little bit more risky.
If now in the corporate world, what financial mistakes do you see business owners making?
Yo, the first one that comes to mind is business owners have like 80% of their assets tied into business. They only think about the business. They don't think about their personal wealth and finance. And you have got to, because having everything tied up into the business puts you in a terrible position, especially if you don't have any protection in place over what you are building. And unfortunately, most business owners don't. They don't have any type of protection in place, whether it's an improper entity structure, whether it's any type of, key person insurance or, any retention strategies. Like there's so many different things that a lot of business owners aren't even thinking about. They're just building and building and building and building and building with the expectation that building that they're doing is going to be their retirement. they think it's going to sell for whatever they want it to sell for without realizing how valuation works
Yeah.
and the reality of what it's actually going to look like. I was actually dealing with a client with this recently. He had been building a business for, a couple of decades, 60s, wanted to retire, went to go sell it. It's not selling anywhere near what he thought it was going to sell for. And that's in part because he didn't work on his personal side. So he has nothing else to supplement his retirement. So he didn't work on the fundamentals when it comes to running a healthy business. And some of those fundamentals very much include focusing on your personal financial situation in addition to what you got going on in the business.
I love that. And I guess the cheat sheet, as you jumped over this, my Builder 20 day, I talked about key man or key person insurance. Walk through that for maybe some that may have missed that or don't know what that is and how that plays such a big role in their company, especially in a small business.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And the owner is the most keyest of persons, by the way. And so key person insurance basically protects the company if something happens to a person who is of significance to the organization, right? So maybe it's an executive that does all your marketing. And if they were gone, you would have no marketing. And marketing is, responsible for 80% of your business. You know what I mean? Or maybe, again, it's the owner. Either way, it's somebody whose absence would drastically impact the success of your organization. And so key person insurance has something in place where if something were to happen, then it could be, chronic critical terminal illness. It could be death. It's something in place. And depending on the type of insurance, it could be, their exit. There's different ways to structure different things, but it's something that would help supplement that need that they fill if they were to no longer be there. So it protects your business, whether it gives you space to hire somebody or the capital to hire somebody that you would need to hire to fill that void, or, whatever other scenario that would require funds to supplement, again, the loss of activity that you experience by losing that individual. And key person insurance, that should be step one. And unfortunately, most business owners I talk to don't have key person insurance.
Yeah, and it's a problem to your point. Especially if the person is called one man, one woman band, right? Or they're the sole operator, or even if there's a key director maybe in the company and they leave, you want to have money where you have a cash flow of the company as you're trying to bridge that gap to find someone to hire in their place or, keep the business going. And I think that's what's, one of the most difficult things is, for builders, contractors, a lot of my audience, architects, designers, builders, is you build this company. It's a fee business. You've been working on it for years. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm 60. What do I do now? Yep. Do I give it to one of my kids, one of my employees? What's the valuation? How do we get there? Because there was no thought or planning up to that point.
It's interesting that you bring that up. And what you're saying, like what you're describing is why I went and became a certified exit planning advisor as well, because I saw this gap as I started working with business owner clients on the finance side. I was like, dude, there's a huge gap. So I was like, let me go become a SEPA so that I can learn how to have some of this dialogue a little bit more effectively and look at the bigger picture of all of the things at play. And being a SEPA, it's all about value acceleration. How do you accelerate the value of your organization? Because you are going to exit, period. Business. So we want to make sure that it happens on your terms. We want to make sure that you are prepared for that. And that includes personal finance. That includes entity structure. That includes looking at the bigger picture. And I don't know why my brain came to this too, as we're talking about businesses specifically, but buy-sell agreements is another thing.
Yeah,
because especially when it comes to people in the trades, I notice they usually start a business together. It's not always solo, and there's nothing there to protect the entity in case of, one of the owners, something happened to one of the owners or one of the owners exiting. There's no buy-sell agreement in place. There's no fund structure for that buy-sell agreement. These are some of the things that I see with business owners specifically. No protection, keeping the majority of their assets tied up in the business, not planning for their personal finance, and not planning for the exit of one or all of the owners, or legacy planning. How are we going to pass this on to our posterity? Because a lot of people, this is another thing that I see. A lot of people think they've been building, especially that baby boomer generation, right? They've been building for however many decades, and now they're exiting. And a lot of them in their brain, they're like, yeah, my kids, my family, they're just going to inherit this. My posterity is going to take over this. And come to realize that may not be on the list of things to do for their posterity. So it's like, okay, well, how do we actually make a smooth transition for this entity and make sure that you capitalize, or your posterity can capitalize in some way, shape, or form on everything that you've built? And it all just comes down to a plan. You just got to plan it out.
See, I love that because the buy sell agreement is something that is often missed too. Because as a small business, to your point, let's just say in a perfect world, Nathan, you and I are business partners. We get along great. We figured out our roles. We're like step in step. Something happens to one of us. Well, we both have spouses, right? How does that come into play? As they come into the picture, and you start, when you have something that's fully documented, or let's just say one of us aren't performing, I'm not performing, and you're like, well, damn, Brad, like you're not pulling your weight. We can't, and it creates a position where there's clear, to your point, a clear exit, a clear determination, a clear value of how, we get from A to B.
Yep, 100%. Because I guarantee you don't want to be in business with my wife. She's phenomenal, but she's raising 5 kids. Her English is spotty. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, but no, just to your point, man. And you're right. People aren't thinking about that. Right. And that's what a buy sell agreement is there for, is to have in consideration what happens in those situations. But again, most businesses, especially nowadays, most businesses don't have these protections in place because all they're focusing on is building the business. They just want to make it last. They just want to be successful. And I can't stress enough, like, and this is something even from the military, like even when we're running an assault, like an ambush, a raid or something like that, like you put in security first. The first thing you do is put in security, right? Then you lay the assault, then you can, you ambush, whatever, you raid, whatever. Then you pull security out, basically, right? And so it's the same in business. You put in security first so that you can build your empire within secure borders. If you don't, you're leaving everything that you're doing subject to one event and it's gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to your point, it goes back to the first comment you made that so many business owners have 80% of their assets or net worth or focus into the business, and so let's say there's a car accident, let's say there's a lawsuit, let's say in case in point I work for a company that was tied in a big lawsuit, and because they didn't have arm's length on some other things in their company, like it was catastrophic, and you think there's protections for a reason. And, you really have to look at what those are. To your point, security, it's no different than, a military operation.
That's right. It's absolutely right.
So what do something that I know you've talked about is legacy, right? Throughout this conversation. And, I know part of your career path is you're working with, your clients to create generational wealth, right? To understand to this point, right? Do we have security? Do we have clear agreements? How do those two intertwine? Because I know there's an element of you're trying to help your clients build generational wealth and protections, and legacy is important to you. And how do you instill that, like how legacy will play a role in maybe someone's personal wealth?
That's a really, really good question. And just to make sure I understand it correctly, it's like, how do I translate that? How do I communicate that with the people that I work with?
Yeah.
I like to paint a picture. You know what I mean? I like to paint a picture for them and draw scenarios. You know what I mean? If this, what then? If something happens to you, what happens to the business? If something happens to the, you know what I mean? And like, bang, you're no longer here. What's happening to your family? What's happening to your business? And I really just paint pictures. And especially when it comes to the wealth side and the legacy and the generational wealth, like kind of what you just specifically talked about, brother, we're at $39 trillion in debt as a nation. This is literally an unfathomable amount of money. We've doubled the national debt about every 8 years for the past couple of decades. This is exponential growth that we didn't think was even possible. The total debt to GDP ratio is negative 133%. That means like the government is spending significantly more than is coming in. The reason that's relevant to this topic is because the part of the picture that I paint is like, hey, dude, what are you doing to mitigate your tax exposure? You see, even the people who are playing the game right, they've got an accumulation strategy. They're like, hey, I'm working my money in the right angles. They've got these different things in place. But what are you doing to diversify your tax strategy? How are you going to make sure that your assets don't enter into probate and experience a 30% depreciation before your family gets to touch it? Like, so anyway, I like part of the way, and it's very, very particular because when I work with people, I get to know them. Like one of the first things that I do is I just start asking questions. I want to get to know people. Like as we've established the means to communicate in real time across the globe, we've gotten worse at connecting. So my first step is connecting. I want to get to know who I'm talking to. I want to understand them, their goals, their concerns, their situation, all the things so that I can learn how to serve them. And in that, brother, that's where I understand how do I paint the picture to really hit home on the things that they should be thinking about that they may not be thinking about. Right. And I help them understand what it is and why. Not to the extent that I'm just going to push them. I'm just not that type of dude, but I will paint a picture and I'll help make sure that you are aware. And then I'll be the sidekick. You be the Batman in your story. You could stay the superhero, right? I'm going to make sure that you're well equipped and I'll be over here as a sidekick guiding you as most effectively as you let me.
I love that. If someone's listening today, Nathan, on the podcast and they're feeling they're in a place where they're stuck, whether it's financially, mentally, professionally, are there actions, resources, what would you recommend for them?
Dude, if we're talking about, business and finance, like I'd say, hey, if you've never had a financial analysis, go get one. Go do over 70% of the population has never had a financial analysis. And then we wonder why people are suffering financially. It's because they're shooting in the dark. Yeah. Dude, go get an analysis, get clear on the freaking target, understand the battle space. You know what I'm saying? And whether that's with me or my team or somebody else, doesn't matter. Just go get it done. Now, in those other areas, dude, getting clear again on identity. Like, hey, who are you? Who do you intend to be? How can you live into who you intend to be? Like, start living on purpose. And there are so many different things. Which is part of why we work together to start the Abundant Man Project. Again, to build men, to inspire men to be abundant and amplify their God-given potential. To give that space for men, to explore what that is and collaborate with other men. So there's tons of things like that. And again, whether it's the Abundant Man Project or something else, go tie in with a community and a network. If you remember that first pillar, associations, who do you associate with? Who are you spending the most of your time with? Are they building you up? Do they edify you? Are they encouraging you? Do they inspire you? Do they push you to be a better version of yourself? Because if not, you might want to change your circle. So either A, go get an analysis from a financial professional who can help you. And on the other areas, dude, go find the associations that will help you elevate to a place where you might not even think is possible.
It's funny how everything comes back to kind of these core things you mentioned because, the reality is entrepreneurship, business ownership can be lonely. It can be, you're fighting some of these battles. And, fortunately, I'm in some associations, Builder 20, I'm in, other masterminds. And you see there's strategies that come from it. There's sometimes psychology that comes from it, right? Sharing some of those losses. But to your point, and you brought up habits, like, there is an element to like health, right? And how that plays a role. And, you mentioned even before the podcast that you're changing your regimen. That used to be early morning. Now you're switching it up. Like, how has that changed for you? Is it due to, having 5 kids, your schedule? I mean, what are you working on from that aspect on number 2 on those habits?
Dude, so and I keep saying, dude, I'm sorry. That's just like,
no, I grew up in San Diego. That's been a hard word for me to get rid of. So dude, yeah, I'm good.
So I noticed that, like I keep saying that, like every time I open up.
No, you're passionate. It's exciting. That's why it comes out.
Yeah, I am. I really am. And so my habits, I'm very intentional with how I start my day. I think that's very important. And this is new, like exercising in the afternoon, but how I start my day, like I'm just going to share because you asked a question, like, hey, what are some of the things that you're doing in that second area? Dude, I start with a prayer. I wake up, I kneel down and I say a prayer. And part of the reason I kneel down to say that prayer is because it's going to make me get out of bed. So like I have to get out of my little comfort space, right? With my nice little pillow, my comfortable bed next to my beautiful wife. And I've got to kneel down and I've got to pray. And I pray for different things. But either way, that's how I start my day, with a conversation with our Father in heaven, with God, with my higher power, right? From there, I go and I get ready, like, personal hygiene, things of that nature. Nobody wants to walk around with dragon breath all day. Then I'll come downstairs and I take fiber and electrolytes. That's kind of how I start my day. And then I will read. I will spend time reading something, right? Just to kind of start just getting things flowing, like get my brain working. From there, I will journal a little bit, right? And so I'll write down maybe some of the things that I read, maybe some of the things that I'm going to accomplish throughout the day, maybe some of the things that I did the day prior that I'm grateful for. But I will start journaling. I will just write some things down and just, again, start just being creative. From there, I take time to envision, like, me accomplishing what I want to accomplish. Like I will actually think about, like for a time, it was me speaking on stage to thousands of people, and I've been doing that. And so that's not necessarily what I envision anymore. Now it's more like getting my six pack back, because I do not look like 20+ year old Nathan. I'm 38-year-old Nathan. And so I envision myself being physically fit in the way that I want to be. From there, I will exercise. So even now with me working out in the afternoon, that means like moving heavy things. Like that means me moving major weight. But even in the morning, I will still do push-ups. Like I do at least 200 push-ups a day, right?
Wow.
And I hold myself accountable to that, right? And so like, affirmations. I have daily affirmations that I say every single day. And I do that not just with me. I have me and my kids, my wife, our family together. We affirm who we are, not only as an individual, but as a family unit. And so obviously in the morning, they're usually not waking up with me. So I'm saying my personal affirmations, but we'll absolutely say them either together when they all get up or before we go to bed, sometimes both. And that's usually, those are the habits that I have to intentionally start my day off. Because if you take control of your day, pardon me, if you take control of your morning, you take control of your day. If you take control of your day, you take control of your week, the month, the year, your life. And so I'm very intentional about that. Now, outside of that, again, when it comes to business, I similarly have habits, whether it's, meetings that I have with my core leadership team, trainings that I do with everybody, to build and develop leaders within this space. I have designated times and things that I do because I know they lead to success. And then I explore new things. Like I have my core habits and the things that I know, but I also know that we have to adapt and overcome. Like we've got to evolve with the evolving environment. And so I do try new things. Like we've just rolled out a whole new like technology base, which is freaking crazy and awesome. And even now, like working out in the afternoon. And part of the reason I'm doing that is because I'm like, hey, maybe I take this time in the morning to be more creative, maybe to create content, maybe to do this, maybe to do that, maybe to write a book. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if I'm going to stay working out in the afternoon. I've done it yesterday. I'm going to do it today. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing it for forever. We're going to find out.
But I love that because really it's trial and error. I mean, you mentioned balance. I mean, you're trying to figure out all these different, pillars. You're trying to figure out your business. You have 5 kids, right? That need dad time. And, you're involved in some of these associations. And so there's a balance where you're working at your, the optimum efficiency, going back to where a lot of us don't, we may be busy, but we're not productive, or at least not as productive as we can be. And so hence the reason, you can just tell, Nathan, from your personality, like a sponge, like you're willing to learn, you're willing to process things, you're willing to, push yourself. And I think that is rare, especially in society today.
Yeah. That last bit that you said there, one of the ways to always like entice me is just invite me to a conversation. I know I don't know everything, and I always want to learn. I always want to soak it up. Just to your point, man, I'm always seeking to improve because there's always room for improvement. And that factor right there, that being open to conversations, it has led me to so much success and abundance that I don't even know what to compare it to. Just being, again, open to dialogue and to having a conversation.
Yeah, there's an element of, to your point, I mean, you have to have an element of humility, like no matter how confident you are and going through Ranger School and you've accomplished some amazing things, some great life experience, but you can tell there's still humility where you're willing to learn. And, I found that, us as humans, like, especially in any role, like you just do so much better if you're willing to learn, and take criticism, whatever that may be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be a hard one for people.
All of us, we're prideful, man. It's tough.
Yeah, man. And that's why even, like for me, one of the biggest things that I've done and that's helped me over the years, especially coming out of the military, is just learning to communicate a little bit different. Because in the military, it's very much like, hey, you're going to do this because it has to get done. Nobody cares about the feelings. Nobody cares about all this stuff and the other stuff. Like, it doesn't matter. Get this done, period. And so like learning over the past several years, crazy because it's almost a decade that I've been out of the military now. It's really been learning how to communicate effectively with people and give constructive criticism. Like, don't just be like, hey, you suck, so fix yourself. But like, really let's explore it. Let's explore the shortfalls. Let's explore the gaps. Let's appreciate the greatness that you have and all the things that you do amazingly. And then let's identify and explore the areas that maybe we can make a few tweaks. You know what I mean? And it's been a hell of a ride just learning how to be a better man.
I love that. What keeps you up at night?
Nothing. My 4 month old baby right now.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. I don't think my kids slept through the night till I have 6 of them, and I don't think they slept till they're like 10 months.
Dude, they were tag teaming last night, dude. The 4-month-old and 3-year-old, like what, like right when Daniela got Lincoln in bed, like put him down in his little crib or whatever. All of a sudden, Washington comes in, and he's like, "Mom," I'm like, "Hey, come here, big guy." Let's do mommy. You know what I mean? So it's these little people. That's the only thing that keeps me up.
Well, you're sleep deprived, man. Ranger school, you got this. Like this is nothing.
It's all good. Just let it down.
What do you do for fun?
I love riding motorcycles. I love shooting guns. I love. I love spending time with my family, my little people. I can't get enough of them. It's the coolest thing I've ever done is be a father.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So sharing those things that I do, like shooting, riding a motorcycle, we do all that stuff as a family, walking through the freaking mountains, like traveling, things that I do with my family. That's
that.
Love.
Well, you've been amazing, Nathan. I appreciate, the experience and knowledge, counsel, everything you share with our audience and for making time today. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.